Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 71st episode on September 23rd, 2021. My name is Andy Z. I'm the host of the show, coming to you from Los Angeles, California.
And my name is Sunsara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the RNL show, and we mean what our name says. This is a show about revolution and nothing less.
And today we're going to be bringing you two big segments with different parts to them. The first thing is going to be, what is the nature of the system of capitalism-imperialism? And that's going to be followed by a very good segment on the emergency around abortion rights being stripped away from women.
We wanted to begin today's show, before going into that, by drawing your attention to this piece. It's a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution. It was issued by the RevComs. We're part of the RevComs, and it's available on the website revcom.us that we put this show out in conjunction with. And it really brings alive why we need an actual revolution and the time that we're in, a rare time that such a revolution, even in a powerful country like this, could be ripened. And that's what we're working on with every episode and inviting you into.
Yeah, and we want to welcome all new viewers by reading a little bit of this declaration, especially the students who are just coming back to school and may have met the RevComs for the first time. And it will repay for everybody who's been watching the show over the last 70 episodes. So let's begin. It starts by saying, let's get down to basics. We need a revolution, nothing less.
To everyone who can't stand this world the way it is, who is sick and tired of so many people being treated as less than human, who knows that the claim of liberty and justice for all is a cruel lie, who is righteously enraged that injustice and inequality go on and on and on, despite false promises and honeyed words from people in power or those seeking power.
Everyone who agonizes about where things are headed and the fact that to be young now means to be denied a decent future or any future at all.
Everyone who has ever dreamed about something much better or even wondered whether that's possible.
Everyone who hungers for a world without oppression, exploitation, poverty, and the destruction of the environment.
Everyone who has the heart to fight for something that is really worth fighting for. You need to be part of this revolution.
And this revolution is not just a good idea. It is actually possible. And Sunsara, as you know, and we want to tell our audience that this declaration goes into the fact that revolutions are not always possible in a country like this, a powerful country like the United States, but that we have entered a time when it really could be possible. But as it says in the declaration in the third part, it says that to make this revolution a reality, we need leadership with the scientific method, the strategy and program that can shine a light through the madness and chaos that this system is constantly creating and can lead in carving the path forward out of this madness to the radically new world we need. And we have that leadership in Bob Avakian, BA.
BA is the architect of a whole new framework for the liberation of all oppressed people and the emancipation of all humanity, the new communism. We are followers of BA, and you need to become followers of BA too. There has never been a leader like this in this country, and there is no other leader like this in the world now. We cannot afford not to follow this leadership if we ever want to get free and put an end to this madness. Now, we wanted to read these two passages from this piece, both as a welcome to the show, because this is what our show is rooted in and bringing alive, and again, to point you to this declaration, which everybody should get their hands on, read, dig into, and spread everywhere right now, where people are hungering for, searching for a different way the world could be, or don't even know that that's what they're looking for. They need to get this.
Yeah, we need to change the situation where people don't know about this revolution. To make an actual revolution is going to require millions of people. And right now we're trying to organize, and we're working hard to organize the thousands of people to make a beginning. Organizing people into the revolution means going out to all sorts of people who hate this system, as we read at the beginning of this broadcast. We read the different kinds of people who should be a part of this. And you need to get this to them. You need to get into it at revcom.us, get people to watch this show on our channel at YouTube, the Revcoms. If you're watching this now, spread it around while you're watching. Subscribe to our channel. Really important to do that, to subscribe to the channel so you can get notices of what we're doing. And most important, as you're getting into this, discuss this. Grapple with why we need an actual revolution. What we're saying an actual revolution involves overthrowing this system. And there's a strategy for that. And what this revolution is for. In the Constitution for a new socialist republic, it gives a sense of the new society we're going to build and the goal of a world that's overcome all forms of exploitation and oppression, aiming at the emancipation of all humanity. This is what this is all about. And start talking about that, working with the ideas, and most important, get with the Revcoms. We have revolution clubs all around in different cities around the country, and we're encouraging people where we're not to start organizing revolution clubs and networks around the principles of the revolution clubs and eventually forming your own clubs. But to get started on this, why don't we get right in today's episode?
Yeah, let's go to our first segment with Andy.
In the last week, people all over the world have seen this photograph. The white man, a 21st century Border Patrol immigrant rustler on horseback, grabbing a black man. The reins of the horse like a snake of a whip wrapping around this young black man whose face is a tense grimace of terror trying to escape the clutches of this modern-day slave catcher whose long leather holster presumably holds a long gun. It is said that a photograph tells a story of 1,000 words. This photograph tells the story of 500 plus years of colonialization, of slave catcher and overseer, of genocide of the native peoples, and a century and a half of the ruthless persecution of immigrants in this greatest of all countries. Not 1,000 words or 1,000 pages would tell all the stories of theft, brutality, enslavement, and virtual enslavement, and the current reality of immigrants and refugees all over this planet. And what does this black man have in his hands? Plastic bags with takeout food, purchased across the Rio Grande River in Mexico, as he returns to the squalor of the conditions in the camp of mostly Haitian migrants in the little border town of Del Rio in Texas, where 12,000 people, 12,000 Haitians are living under a bridge with 20 porta potties for sanitation. Watch this report from Al Jazeera.
There's more than 12,000 migrants, mostly Haitians, in the camp that sprung up in Del Rio, Texas, over the last 2 weeks. They want asylum, but US authorities are overwhelmed. This is just the latest flashpoint in a months-long surge of people illegally crossing the border, and there's little in the camp for them.
Sanitary products? There aren't any. Food? There isn't any either. They don't give you anything.
We met Nicholas on the Mexican bank of the river, searching for food and medicine for his family. He hadn't realized until we asked him about it that US authorities are also now flying Haitians back home.
There's planes now going deporting people. What do you think about that?
What kills me about that is that everyone knows what we Haitians are going through. There's no president. Crime is high. Students can't go to school. There's no work. The economy is down. People can't put up with that. Deportation is not good for us.
Like many others, he said he'd suffered to get this far, on a journey through South America, past gangs and through a patch of jungle called the Darien Gap, notorious for rape and robbery. It was really difficult. I saw a lot of us who died, he told me. Now he's touched ground in his promised land, the US, but it looks unlikely he'll be able to stay there. In the rush for food, we didn't see him make it back across the river into Texas. And by the afternoon, Mexican security forces were patrolling the river too. It was getting even tougher.
This week on our website, revcom.us, there's a piece that tells more of the migrants' horrific stories and also what lies behind this picture. Quote, "The U.S. response to this crisis has been sadistic, cold-hearted inhumanity. Joe Biden entered the presidency in January claiming he would immediately end Trump's cruel immigration policies. That was then. Now the U.S. under Biden is moving quickly and violently to expel many of these migrants who have reached the U.S. and to pressure Mexico into aggressively preventing more from arriving." Our article goes deeper, quote, "The horrific oppression facing all immigrants and all those arrested at the border is deeply embedded into the system of global plunder and exploitation called capitalism-imperialism, a system that routinely feasts upon and destroys the lives of millions and enforces with murderous brutality, regardless of who the political leadership of the system is. These crimes are being orchestrated and carried out by the Biden administration that promised to carry out, quote, fair and humane, end quote, policy towards immigrants. Yet even more bloodthirsty fascists in the Republican Party demand more and much more violence and repression to carry out and enforce the interests of Make America Great. Both of them have no real answers other than carrying out massive and escalating repression. Both of them represent the interests of the capitalist imperialist system that feasts upon and destroys the lives of billions of people worldwide. And in a few minutes, we're going to get into just what this capitalist imperialist system really is. First, I want to say a few more things about these and the tens of millions of refugees in the world today. In the news clip we just showed, you can see the tremendous risk, sacrifice, determination, ingenuity, and courage it takes to make the journey these Haitians have made. And they have been doing so over years. Many were reportedly refugees who left Haiti after the massive destructive hurricanes and earthquakes of the last decade, with the misery compounded by the economic and political devastation wrought by U.S. imperialism. These migrants then traveled by sea and land seeking refuge in South and Central American countries that are themselves facing extreme circumstances due to the workings of imperialism. But I want to move across the Atlantic to North Africa, where tens of thousands of refugees have risked their lives to escape the increasingly devastating droughts that have worsened with global warming as well as from civil wars. Today, and what will be a continually escalating crisis for humanity, tens and soon hundreds of millions of refugees will be created by the devastation of the environment, interpenetrating with wars and upheaval as life becomes more and more desperate and precarious for hundreds of millions of people in the global south. The planet and humanity cries out for a radically different future. Last week on the RNL show, we had a special segment on climate change. It is a must-see that rewards repeated viewings. And we have the Constitution for a New Socialist Republic in North America, authored by Bob Avakian, which goes into how a genuine socialist society, a new republic, established after this system of capitalism-imperialism has been overthrown, would make ecological sustainability a bedrock principle of the new society and would shatter the chains of imperialist domination. Just over a year ago, in August 2020, a young poet from the Sudan in Northeast Africa, just south of Egypt, was one of 45 people, including 5 children, who drowned in the Mediterranean Sea in a rubber raft seeking to flee to the southern shores of Europe. 37 people survived, and it is unclear whether or not the raft's engine exploded from gunshots or not. And this was but one boatload of the thousands of Sudanese who have trekked the dangerous route across the Sahara Desert to the Mediterranean to escape the harsh living conditions in the Sudan. And it is my understanding that at least 302 people have been killed on this dangerous route since the start of 2020. Abdel Wahab Yusuf was well known among young poets in the Sudan. He was known as Latinos. Growing up dirt poor in what is a place called Southern Darfur, he managed to get a degree from the University of Khartoum, but yet he could not find work nor a safe life. While I don't know much of his life or his thinking, I have read that poetry was popular among the youth. He was published in Sudanese literary magazines and read throughout the Arab world, and he was also active in political and literary groups. Friends, family, and poetry fans wrote that a poem he wrote before he left eerily portrayed what happened last August. You'll die at sea, your head rocked by the roaring waves, your body swaying in the water like a perforated boat. In the prime of youth, you'll go, shy of your 30th birthday. Departing early is not a bad idea, but it surely is if you die alone with no woman calling you to her embrace. Let me hold you to my breast. I have plenty of room. Let me wash the dirt of misery off your soul. I've taken the time to tell Abdel Youssef's story not just because it is little known here in the US, but to underscore, first of all, the humanity that is in the refugee and the unnecessary squander of this potential by the capitalist-imperialist system that destroys lives and crushes spirits of literally millions of people. I tell this story to illustrate that capitalism-imperialism is a worldwide system. I tell this story to bring to life just one more reason we need to put all our hearts, minds, and bodies to spreading the new communism of Bob Avakian all over the world and to making our greatest contribution to the people of the world, to the refugees, by organizing now for a revolution so that no more will any human being be called or thought of as an alien. Abdel Wahab Youssef wrote in one of his last verses, quote, "We will flee from our home, we will flee towards exile, but migration is also cruel. It is unbearable. It will absorb our souls inevitably." With Abdel, with the Haitian refugees on the Texas border in our hearts and minds, we need to turn our outrage into determination to understand what is this system that gives rise to this and all exploitation, oppression, degradation, and destruction of the earth itself. I want to go now to a substantive excerpt from Bob Avakian in his 2003 talk, Revolution, Why It's Necessary, Why It's Possible, and What It's All About, where he breaks down just what capitalism-imperialism really is.
Why is there such lopsidedness in the world? Capitalism today is imperialism, the highest and final stage of capitalism. The word imperialism comes from the same root word as empire. Basically, it refers to having an empire, dominating and exploiting whole countries and whole peoples. Imperialism is actually a word that gets used in different ways sometimes. But it is important to understand what imperialism is in a scientific way. And I don't get scared by the word scientific. Scientific just means understanding its main, most important features and what defines how it works. That's what science does with things. Imperialism means the domination of monopolies, that is, big banks and other financial institutions and large corporations, their domination in the capitalist economy. Mono means one. So the word monotonous, for example, means one tone. It means if I were just to talk like this all the time, I would be talking in a monotone. Oh, the N wasn't a monotone, but that's what it means to be monotonous. You can see why monotonous also means boring. You can see why that's boring. There used to be a doo-wop singing group back in the day called the Monotones. Did this song called The Book of Love. I never understood why they called themselves the monotone, because it meant only one tone. They had this song, I wonder, wonder who wrote the Book of Love. If they were to do a monotone, it'd be, I wonder, wonder who wrote the Book of Love. Anyway, nobody said we can't have fun while we're doing this. So mono means mono or mono means one. And monopoly just means there's just one pole, just one or a few of something controlling and dominating a whole industry or a whole economy. A few or one or a few big companies dominating whole parts of the economy or whole economies. In the US, for example, you can see examples of monopolies everywhere. Think of TV, radio stations. Think of Clear Channel owning all those radio stations. Think of the few cable companies that there are. But not just in communications. Car companies. How many car companies are there? Think about soda. How many soda companies are there? Fast food. How many fast food companies are there? How many mom and pop stores are left? They've all been driven out by McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King. And you can go right down the line. Every part of the economy is dominated by one or a few gigantic companies. That's monopoly. That's one of the main features of capitalism when it reaches the stage of monopoly capitalism or imperialism, because it spreads this all over the world. But besides the domination of the economy by monopolies, imperialism means the joining together of capitalists in big international, or what are sometimes called multinational companies, corporations, or combinations of gigantic combinations of corporations, which monopolize large part of the country, large parts of the economy of countries all over the world. And at the same time, there continues to be rivalry between monopolies within countries and all over the world, because the laws of capitalism and capitalist commodity production and exchange, the law of expand or die, beat out the other one or go under, that law is still operating. Imperialism also means exporting capital to countries all over the world. By that I mean investing and directly exploiting the people in those countries and making loans to local companies and local governments, profiting from the interest on the loans and gaining more control that way over the economies of those countries. Imperialism means the domination of the nations that are less capitalistically developed, what today is generally called the Third World, and the super exploitation of the working people there. That is, exploitation even beyond what occurs in the capitalist countries themselves. And bound up with all this, imperialism means war. War against rival imperialist states like World War I and World War II, and war against the oppressed peoples and nations of the Third World, and especially against their revolutionary struggles to end domination by imperialism, like the Vietnam War. Or even we had the situation of the recent wars against Iraq, where Saddam Hussein and his government were not at all revolutionary, and were even trying to keep on making deals with the imperialists, but were at the same time trying to get better terms and trying to resist some of the more extreme forms of domination that the U.S. government was insisting on. Now, sometimes you take people like Bill Gates or the founders of Apple Computers, and you'll hear them say things like, well, we took the initiative. We took the risk to come up with something new. So why shouldn't we get the benefits? But a deeper question is, when we think about these Apple computer guys sitting in their garage like nerds tinkering around with things in the 70s, why and how were they in a position to do that? What is the other side of this picture that's blotted out? Why were they, at age 20, let's say, able to spend that time doing that, while someone else on the other side of the world at age 6 was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing wealth that they were floating on, so to speak? Because all this wealth is underlying. It's like they're sitting in a big swimming pool that's filled up with the labor of children and others all over the world. They're floating on top of it with the leisure time to get up out of the swimming pool and go to their garage and tinker around and come up with some innovation. So when you hear them say this, once again, we have to look at the other side of the picture that's blotted out, and we have to ask, where does the wealth come from that provides the foundation on which they're able to do this? And why do we have a world in which they are able to do that, while millions and hundreds of millions of children from the time they're much younger have no prospect of ever being able to do that, or even ever being able to have any playtime? Capitalism, especially now that it has reached the stage of imperialism, controls, dominates, manipulates, and mangles the lives of people all over the world. Many times you hear these imperialists and their mouthpieces say things like this: well, you say we're exploiting people, but without us there'd be no jobs. They come out with, especially when it comes to light, that they are paying people something like a few cents an hour in countries all over the Third World. No. The truth is that without these imperialists, there would still be people capable of working, people capable of planning and running an economy. There would still be natural resources and potential wealth for the people in those countries when they take control over their societies and remake them in a radical way through revolution. But then, what there would be is no capital, no capitalism, no imperialism exploiting and robbing the people and plundering their countries. And the masses of people everywhere in the world would be much better off. You cannot make this system into something else than what it is. So long as it rules, so long as it is in effect, everything that it does, all the ways it makes people suffer all over the world will continue and only get worse. Because that's the only way this system can operate. The foundation of every society is its economic system, the way in which people organize themselves or are organized under the command of others to produce and distribute the things that people use in everyday life. Without this, society could not exist and human life would stop. From this economic foundation flows the relations among people in the society, the politics, and the art and culture, and the way of thinking that is dominant in that society.
Unbelievable as it may seem, in the 21st century, there are still people, including people in positions of power and authority, who are determined to force women to bear children, regardless of the situation, the feelings, and the better judgment of those women themselves. That is a way of enslaving women to the dictates of an oppressive, male supremacist, patriarchal system. And that is what the cruel fanatics who are determined to deny women the right to abortion are really all about. This statement from Bob Avakian captures well what is at stake in the most extreme abortion ban that has been passed in the nearly 50 years since abortion has been legal, and which just became law on September 1st in the state of Texas. Right now, it is illegal to get an abortion or to assist a woman in obtaining an abortion in Texas after about 6 weeks into pregnancy, long before most women even know they are pregnant. And on December 1st of this year, the Supreme Court of the United States has agreed to hear another abortion ban, this one out of Mississippi, that could completely overturn abortion protections nationwide altogether. As Bob Avakian emphasized, this is outrageous. Forced motherhood is female enslavement. That's what we are facing. Yet precisely at this moment of tipping point, as abortion is being criminalized and hanging by a thread nationwide, the streets are largely silent. Shockwaves rippled across sections of society after this ban became law in Texas, but most people still do not know this is going on. This situation needs to be transformed urgently. To this end, it is very important that there are marches, nationwide marches for reproductive rights that have been called on October 2nd by the Women's March and other organizations. And it is very important that these marches be as powerful, as massive, as determined, as uncompromising, and as galvanizing as possible. And not simply one-off events where people vent their outrage and then go back to their lives and make peace to and learn to live with this nightmare of criminalizing abortion. People must reject the counsel that has been offered by all too many voices to work within the official channels and the long, patient process of winning elections, in reality resigning themselves to and learning to live with abortion being illegal, and all that means for women's lives. Instead, these marches need to be part of a turning point in society, unleashing sustained mass struggle to refuse to let this go down, to refuse to let women be slammed backwards in this way. At the same time, this assault on the lives of women poses big questions that need to be ripped open in society. What kind of society, what kind of system do we live under where these rights can be taken away from women? And how did we get to this place? And what most fundamentally is needed to get to a world where women are treated as full human beings? Most fundamentally, we need a revolution rooted in the new communism that Bob Avakian has forged. This and only this can bring about a society where the chains on women are broken and all of humanity is emancipated. And the RevComs are fighting right now on the basis of the declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution, to bring people into this revolution. And we invite and urge everybody to get into that declaration and to spread it. Right now, people need to be lifting their sights to revolution and getting organized to make that real. And one of the ways that we want to invite you to participate in all of this and strengthening the fight against this fascist assault on women and getting organized for revolution is calling on you to join these contingents being organized by the revolution clubs at the October 2nd marches. Break the chains, unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution contingents. This will be a way to march together, spread this message, get organized, and take that struggle forward coming out of these marches. And there'll be mass meetings this weekend on Sunday the 26th to learn more about this revolution and to be part of planning for and organizing these contingents. So to get into this question of the assault on abortion and what's needed, what's concentrated in it and what's needed today on the RNL show, we want to go at this in two ways. First, we're going to share a series of short contributions from the RevComs going at what's at stake in this battle. And then we're going to do a more extended segment of an interview that I did with Dahlia Lithwick, who is a writer at Slate.com who covers the courts and the law. And with her, we get into both what's concentrated in this in these abortion bans in terms of women's rights and reproductive freedom, but also the assault they concentrate on the rule of law in this country and why that matters. So to get us started, we're going to kick this off with a poem that was sent to us by a member of the Chicago Revolution Club, Roosevelt. This is Roosevelt reading his poem, Her Eyes.
Her Eyes by Roosevelt from the Chicago Revolution Club. Her eyes beheld pain. Her eyes beheld the pain of 1,000 years of women abuse. It beheld the pain of a mother's childbirth and at the same time the rape of a child by a father, an uncle, a cousin, a close family friend, a pregnancy she definitely didn't want, and a bunch of men delivered the verdict that she can't have an abortion. Damn. Her eyes beheld the pain that millions of women before her held, a pain that no matter what she do in life, male supremacy would never give way to her. Her eyes beheld the pain of the torturous days and nights no one heard her loud screams from the abuse she was forced to endure alone while looking you directly in the eyes. Her eyes beheld pain. Her eyes beheld the pain that just as many politicians were talking about a glass ceiling, that very same glass ceiling was falling on her, ripping and tearing into her flesh to never let her rise up under male supremacy. Her eyes beheld pain. Her eyes beheld the pains of a political prisoner in Iran refused to become one with her hijab, forced upon her by a male regime, not only there, no, but in other places where the status of women is behind men, even doing prayers. But now in the United States, women everywhere in Iran was finally heard and their sentence was being overturned. And that feeling that only a real revolution can give to those who were oppressed so long that the oppressed was oppressed. Her eyes held the pain from the shackles that was placed around her from birth, to have to go through life with the understanding that, as James Brown said, it's a man's world. Her eyes beheld true joy that comes with the knowledge that this system can be changed to one which means no more men rule the world, no whole body bullshit. she could now breathe without her breath being snatched away. Her eyes held love for the very first time. Unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution. Another world is in birth and can and will transform everything. Her eyes beheld love.
So we really want to thank Roosevelt for that beautiful poem, for its heart, its internationalism, its revolutionary fire and optimism, and for the way that he models something that BA has really emphasized, which is that the fight to break the chains on women is not a fight only for women to take up. It's really a fight that everybody who wants to get free needs to take up as a central part of this revolution to emancipate humanity. And we also want to thank the Revolution Club in Chicago for filming that, putting it together, and getting it to us. So with that, we want to move to 2 short TikToks that were put together by our social media team. They speak for themselves.
Don't let these people tell you, these so-called right-to-lifers, that the issue is the killing of innocent babies. The issue is the control over women exercised by forcing them to be mothers, whether or not they want to be at that time. Now, to have children, to raise children, can be a really beautiful experience if that's what you want to do and if you feel in a position to do it in the way that you feel that it should be done. But to have it forced on you is virtual enslavement. Not to even have the choice as to whether you will do that. Here's the key to how you know, or one key to how you know this is not about killing of innocent babies. Try to find one of these rabid anti-abortion groups that is also not opposed to birth control. You'll have a very hard time. They're all opposed to birth control because the issue is not the killing of innocent babies. It's the control and subordination of women.
These Republican fascists that are taking away the right to abortion don't even consider women human beings. And if you think that's an exaggeration, watch this.
And that host body has to have a certain amount of rights because at the end of the day, it is that body that carries this entire other body to term. The question is, what is the value of that life? And is it subordinate to the value of its host body?
Host body, otherwise known as women. These people want to subordinate women to the position of incubator and breeder, and they're already passing legislation that practically outlaws abortion. Are you going to hand the future to these fascist lunatics who want to enslave women? Or are you going to get organized for a liberating revolution to overthrow the system of capitalism that has patriarchy built into it? Because these are the options. There is no going back to normal, and normal was no damn good to begin with.
Like I said, those TikToks speak for themselves. The only thing I would add is that we really encourage you to follow the RevComs on social media and spread this everywhere and send us your own creative contributions. So for our final short from the RevComs as part of this segment, we want to bring you an excerpt of a radio special that I hosted and produced earlier this week on the abortion rights emergency. And this segment features Michelle Chai. The conversation was much more extensive. I'll tell you more about that soon. But this segment features Michelle of the Los Angeles Revolution Club, where she's talking about the Break the Chains, Unleash the Fury of Women as a Mighty Force for Revolution contingents that the RevComs are organizing as part of the October 2nd marches. So she's going to tell you a little bit about them and how you can get involved.
So these October 2nd marches, we're going to have a contingent within them, right? Everybody who cares about, right now the attacks, on the right to abortion should be at one of these marches, wherever you are, right? And we're going to have these contingents within them, Break the Chains contingent, Unleash the Fury of Women as a Mighty Force for Revolution. And, and we're calling on people to be there, to not just let this be a one day of symbolic protest and then going home, but the beginning of determined resistance to actually force them to back down from this law and actually stop them from making this a national, a thing where they get rid of abortion, right? And the Revolution Club, we're fighting for a whole different world where we can actually put an end to the oppression of women as a part of putting an end to the oppression of all people everywhere. We need a revolution. We need to overthrow this whole system. You know, one of the slogans is actually patriarchy and capitalism. You cannot end one without ending the other. We need revolution, nothing less. And this is, you know, together with the other very powerful slogans, you know, that as part of our contingent, right? No going back, no surrender, abortion on demand and without apology. Forced motherhood is female enslavement. Christian fascist theocrats, get your laws and vigilantes off our bodies. We need powerful contingents that are loud, that are lively, and that are representing a whole different future and are fighting to actually, you know, not allow this to go down, you know, and calling on all those people, you know, that are out there that were like me 10 years ago, that were questioning, you know, how do I understand this? The question being, are women going to be full human beings or not? And people actually picking a side on that. And that's what these, you know, that's why we're calling on these contingents to, you know, people from all walks of life to actually come together and march in these contingents and on the day itself, right?
And how would people, if they're interested, get in touch with you on that?
So people should DM us at the RevComs, and people should tune in to revcom.us, where there will be a page where people can download stickers and posters and T-shirts. So wherever you're at in the country, if you have a few friends that you want to pull together, go on that website, sign the form. We're going to have a form up pretty soon that you can sign up, and we can link you up with other people in your area. If you're in New York City, contact the New York City Revolution Club. Wherever you're at, contact the Revolution Club. Be out there. Look out for the materials up on the revcom.us website and sign up, and let's go together in the streets.
So we'll be playing more from that in next week's episode 72 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, reminding you now that you should be subscribed to our channel and watch every week. But right now, I really want to underscore Michelle's invitation and challenge to you to join these contingents on October 2nd at these marches. Break the chains. Unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution. These contingents will be fighting to bring alive the following really important messages. No going back, no surrender. Abortion on demand and without apology. Unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution. Christian fascist theocrats, get your laws and vigilantes off our bodies. And patriarchy and capitalism, you can't end one without ending the other. Revolution, nothing less. This message, these messages need to come through and lift people's sights and galvanize people into this revolution and carry forward after October 2nd. So we want to invite you. Plans have already been announced in New York City, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area for mass organizing meetings this weekend to learn more about this revolution, to get into this revolution, to work on the questions of this revolution together, and to prepare for these contingents. And then, as well, plans are announced for October 2nd in each of those cities. So hook up with those plans wherever you are. And if there's not plans in your area yet, use the resources at revcom.us to organize a contingent where you are, and write to us or write to the Revolution Club organizers at the email address on the screen to get help in organizing a contingent where you are. So with that, we want to move forward in this segment on the question of the abortion rights emergency. This is the interview that I did with Dahlia Lithwick. She is a writer at slate.com. As I said, she covers the courts and the law. And we really got deeply into what's at stake for women, this unprecedented assault on women's reproductive freedom, and the Texas abortion ban and the Supreme Court case coming next month, but also what is probably even less understood, the escalating assault on the rule of law that these bans are a part of. So let's go to that interview right now. Dahlia Lithwick is a writer on the courts and the law for slate.com, and she is the host of Amicus podcast. We're so happy that you can join us here today. Dahlia, welcome.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk, for listeners who maybe are not familiar, Texas on September 1st made law the most extreme abortion ban in 50 years. 6 million women in Texas of reproductive age have been deprived of the ability to decide for themselves when and whether to have a child. And I wonder if you could just react to that law, what it means.
So for many, many years, states trying to do away with Roe enacted these so-called trap laws, right? Targeted regulation of abortion providers. And those were the kind of laws we got used to, right? You got to broaden the hallways in clinics so that two gurneys could go past each other, put in an HVAC system, sometimes would stipulate what it looked like outside the windows of clinics. And this was all ostensibly not to ban abortion, but to make it a pleasant and healthy experience for women. Of course, the object of all those laws was to close clinics, right? Because it's unbelievably onerous. Suddenly, Brett Kavanaugh takes Anthony Kennedy's seat on the court. Amy Coney Barrett takes Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat on the court. And now it's just open season. Now it's just, we're not going to pretend that we want women to make better choices, that we care about their health. We're going to just end abortion. And that's the kind of law that has led to this raft of, as you say, heartbeat bans. Those at 6 weeks are way pre-viability. They're flagrantly unconstitutional. Texas knows it's unconstitutional. But the point is to stop abortion. The reason the Texas law is different from the 15-week bans and the 8-week bans and the other bans we've seen is because for the first time, and this is the sort of deviously, fiendishly clever part, there's no one in Texas to sue because the law doesn't get enforced by state actors. The law is enforced by your neighbor and your garbage man and somebody in Idaho who thinks that you are having an abortion. The entire country is conscripted to bring a civil suit against the provider with this other really pernicious wrinkle that we're going to talk about, which is this bounty system, that if you aid and abet an abortion, or if you, quote, intend to aid and abet an abortion, you can be liable. And that's really the kind of fiendish part of this law, is that it makes it impossible to do what every other jurisdiction that had a 6-week ban or an 8-week ban or a 12-week or whatever, you just immediately enjoin it. You go to the courts and you name the state actor that would enforce it. And the courts say, of course, this is unconstitutional. So that's what's different about this. It was deliberately crafted to evade judicial review. And the roundabout sort of thing that the Supreme Court did is they, when faced with a request by the providers to enjoin this law, said, but nothing we can do, our hands are tied. And so as you note, and this is the important thing, the law goes into effect on September 1, and at midnight, all of the providers, except for somebody who just wrote a piece in the Washington Post, all of the providers stopped giving abortions at 6 weeks, 6-week, quote unquote, the fetal heartbeat. So you are exactly right. In the second most populous state in the nation, even though it is unconstitutional and Texas stipulates that it violates the Constitution, you cannot get an abortion after 6 weeks. And we've already seen horrifying outcomes for women as a consequence.
I think that's really important. And I want to ask more about this vigilante bounty dimension of it and the assault, really an open assault on the rule of law that I think has bigger implications. And I wonder if you could just take a minute on that.
So this is the reason that ultimately when the Supreme Court hands down the decision, the Supreme Court is, implored to get involved, waits 24 hours and hands down a 1.5-page unsigned opinion. We don't know who wrote it, but it's interestingly not 6-3. It's 5-4. Why? Because John Roberts, the Chief Justice, who is not a fan of abortion, who has in virtually every case been at pains to say he doesn't think abortion should be protected by the Constitution, he hives off and sides with the 3 liberal justices in dissent. And he goes so far as to write his own very pointed dissent, and it goes exactly to the question you just asked, the rule of law question. When we do things at midnight without analysis and we don't explain ourselves and we allow, in his view, this unprecedented law that sets the courts aside from review and says, there's nothing you can do, you cannot touch us, that encourages lawlessness. So in other words, what he's reacting to is exactly the thing I think you're surfacing in your question, which is the court really going to let any jurisdiction that wants to evade and elide judicial review just go ahead and do that? And the Chief Justice is affronted that this law was constructed deliberately to get around constitutional scrutiny. And it does raise the question, and he flicks at this in his dissent, not just the optics of doing something like this in the dark of night without reasoning, but really, like, this could now happen anywhere, right? New York could say, we're going to give you a bounty if you turn in your neighbor for gun possession. California could say, hey, anybody who speaks ill of Governor Newsom is going to be, you'll get a $10,000 bounty if you report them. Those are constitutionally protected rights. But if the system is designed exactly the way Texas designed their system, no court can stop it. And that is, as you're pointing out, really the end of the rule of law. It's also the end of, and this is sort of the basis of Joe Biden, of the Biden administration's lawsuit challenging Texas. It really does terrible violence to the supremacy clause and to the sort of role of the federal courts in protecting individual
Can you just
rights.
explain the supremacy clause?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the notion that the Supreme Court and the federal courts and the federal constitutional rules can't be thwarted by state enterprises that would run against federal constitutional rules. And that this is a longstanding notion. It's not complicated. And the Texas law was built to do precisely that. The only other thing that I think is really of a piece with this, and I've written about this a few times, but I think it's not getting enough attention just in this bucket of rule of law concerns, is the problem of deputizing individuals to take the law into their own hands. And it shows both a kind of lack of faith in state actors, right? We're not going to let the state entities enforce the law. We're going to just let everyone make a decision about whether they think subjectively, because it's Tuesday, that someone is violating the ban. And the same day that SB 8 went into effect, Texas's vote suppression bill went into effect. And one of the things it is really permitting and in fact encouraging is for poll watchers and people who think that they're seeing illegal action at polling places to take the law into their own hands. And I just think, in addition to the sort of very meta problem you and I have been talking about, what does it mean to have the courts utterly sidelined? There's another move that is, I think, just as pernicious, which is conscripting every individual who thinks in the moment that a law is being violated to take action. And I think that's as lawless and really fundamentally as dangerous as writing the federal courts out of the picture.
I think that's very important, and it's something that is little understood. And I wanted to ask, I was going to ask it later, but I'll ask it now. I wanted to read something and get your reaction to it because I think it's touching on the same basic issue. This is from an article that was at revcom.us called Bob Avakian on the Law, Justice, and Ending Oppression and Exploitation. And it's analyzing important principles about the rule of law. And so this is just one passage. It says, the criminal legal process is not or should not be a contest between individuals, but a confrontation between the state and people whom the state seeks to deprive of freedom on the basis that they have violated societal norms that are embodied in criminal statutes. The whole point of a legal system is, or should be, to remove disputes or perceived wrongs from the sphere of individual grievance, and the corresponding attempts to settle such grievance through individual acts of revenge or reciprocal wrongdoing, by providing a framework in which society, through established institutions and statutes, which are to be applied and work equally in regard to all, can adjudicate such disputes or claims of wrongdoing. And I think this is supposed to be a leap in the rule of law and a legal system, is that it's not individual retribution, individual vigilantism. And I wonder if you're going right there, and I just think it's very important, very little understood, and maybe you want to say a little bit more about it.
No, I mean, that's a much more elegant articulation of the point I was making, which is, and by the way, I put things like stand your ground laws into this category, laws that essentially say, instead of relying on the superstructure of, the rule of law, and I say that with all of the doubts we have about policing and incarceration, I have no illusion that the systems we have constructed to quote unquote enforce the law are in any way adequate to our needs. But I think that the thing that is worse than that is deputizing everybody to be a vigilante. And the problem with stand your ground laws, right, we're seeing this with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial right now, is that everybody gets to say, it doesn't matter what the cops thought. It doesn't matter if there was an exigent need. It doesn't matter any of this. What matters is what I subjectively thought in the moment, and I thought I should start shooting. And I just think you are completely right. I think that, it's easier kind of cognitively to understand the move of kind of getting the courts out of the picture. That's very clear what was intended. But I think this move that's playing out, as you've just said, in so many contexts, in the voting context, in the gun context, that every person is a law unto themselves. And it really feels like a biblical arrangement, right? It's an eye for an eye. It's just, if I feel that I need to be avenged, there is no check on me. And I think it is absolutely foundational to a rule of law regime to not conscript everybody to take the law into their hands. And I think there's one tiny wrinkle more that's maybe worth throwing in here, because again, I think it hasn't necessarily received enough attention. And that is, if you are a person of color, if you are poor, we know who gets abortions, particularly in Texas. Overwhelmingly, it's people who already have many children. It's overwhelmingly people living in poverty who feel that they cannot care for their child. Let's look at the maternal health outcomes, the infant health outcomes, just the shocking dereliction of responsibility for babies and mothers in Texas. And what has arisen because of generations of, the Hyde Amendment, which has made it impossible to finance terminating a pregnancy, and the trap laws we've talked about, all of the apparatus that has risen up for decades to help the most vulnerable people are entities that, like abortion funds, that find funding for people in need of help, transportation, all of those systems that have arisen to help the most vulnerable pregnant people in the country are the ones that are under attack with SB 8. So part of the nefariousness of this bill is not just, as we've said, it can't be reviewed by a court, and not just, as we've said, it conscripts every one of your neighbors to get a bounty if they turn you in, but it deliberately is a shot at the heart of the entire infrastructure that has arisen in places like Texas to help people.
While there has been a growth of infrastructure to help women as abortion has become increasingly difficult, if not impossible, to access, I think this points to the need that has been missing, frankly, which is a society-wide refutation, resistance, refusal to allow these laws to go down. And it is not a surprise. There is every indication over decades that the loopholes and the services that people have worked within to help women as abortion becomes increasingly criminalized and restricted are going to be closed if this fascist assault on women's rights is not rejected, repudiated, and reversed. And so you're exactly right that these laws target the structures that help women get abortions in increasingly difficult conditions. It's also not a surprise that this would happen. And so this underscores now, okay, late to the party, but now there needs to be a massive fight against this. And I think we have to give a lot of respect and love to Dr. Alan Braid, who publicly defied the abortion ban and is challenging it in court. If he gets sued, he's prepared to do so. And there needs to be a lot more public repudiation and resistance against this, not just in Texas, but nationwide. Let's return to the Supreme Court case that is coming, you said probably in December. There was a 15-week abortion ban out of Mississippi, a state where there's only one abortion clinic in the entire state. It has been blocked because it is blatantly unconstitutional. It's in violation of Roe versus Wade. But the Supreme Court agreed to hear it, which obviously means they're willing to reconsider Roe v. Wade, either altogether or in significant dimensions. So is there anything you think people need to understand about that?
One of the things that Mississippi has asked for in the briefing in Dobbs is for Roe to be overturned. Doesn't happen. Usually states are very modest in their asks of the court. And as I said at the beginning, they do so under the guise of, we just want to help women make good choices. That is gone. All of the rhetoric around trap laws is gone. They just want it to be unconstitutional to have an abortion anywhere. And I think the thing that I see is that difference in the briefing, that what I'm seeing is the states absolutely emboldened to shoot for the moon, to ask for the whole thing. And that's why, and this is where we started, it is so shocking that the court decided to get involved in SB 8 and then let it stand. And if you read the dissents from both Justice Kagan and Justice Sotomayor in that SB 8 order from September 1st, they're saying on the ground, women are being turned away. This is what has happened in the 24 hours this law has gone into effect. Women are not getting constitutionally protected abortions. Like, they're waving their hand saying, this violates Roe. And so now that leads me to think that the states that are feeling emboldened to ask for the moon are feeling emboldened because they think they have 5 votes for it. And that is ground shifting. And that's the thing that I see as a harbinger that the SB 8 decision is really signaling forward. And by the way, and I think this is important, the court has managed in a matter of weeks to shift the Overton window, right? Because we're going to get to Mississippi when Dobbs is argued, and we're going to look at ourselves and say, 15 weeks seems really generous next to Texas. And that's shocking, right? That's viability is 22 weeks, not 15, not 8. But the court has really managed to insert itself into a discourse that would normalize 15 weeks as utterly reasonable. And I think that those moves tell me that we really may see the thing that I never believed I would see, which is Roe overturned this coming spring.
Well, Dahlia, I really want to thank you for making the time to talk with us, to get into the implications of the abortion ban, but also the bigger implications to the rule of law, the state of the courts. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
It was a total pleasure, and really thank you for it. It's incredibly meaningful and important to have long conversations, because this is not stuff that you can do justice to in 2 minutes. So thank you for really deep dive. I think it's absolutely urgently needed.
All right. So I just want to follow up that interview by a further word about the importance of the rule of law. This is actually something that might surprise a lot of viewers and a lot of people, certainly in society, that Bob Avakian, the foremost revolutionary thinker and communist leader in the world today, has done extraordinary work on the importance of the rule of law, both in this current society and really in all societies, but also in the future socialist society, the revolutionary state power we're fighting to bring into being. And I want to point people to 2 really crucial works from him to get further into this. One is a compilation of his writings called Constitution, Law, and Rights in Capitalist Society and in the Future Socialist Society. And these are selections from Bob Avakian's writings on, like it says, the Constitution, laws, and rights today and in the future. And also just this extraordinary work, which is a blueprint for a future society, the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America. It is a concrete blueprint, and it really brings a lot of the vision of a revolutionary, emancipating society. So those are very important. The other thing I wanted to say, just as a follow-up to this whole segment on the abortion rights emergency, is on Monday, there will be an emergency fundraising live stream on our YouTube channel. It'll be on Monday, September 27th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. We need to raise $15,000 to fund these revolutionary Break the Chains, Unleash the Fury of Women as a mighty force for revolution contingents at these marches on October 2nd and going forward. So definitely tune in, tell your friends, start raising money, donating now, and gather together to watch this live stream. It's part of fueling the revolution, but furthering getting organized for revolution.
Okay, and you saw earlier in the show that we were announcing 2 programs at Revolution Book. One about the freeing Iran, the political prisoners in Iran right now. That's this Saturday at 3 p.m. This is going to be live streamed. And then on Wednesday, September 29th, on the 60th anniversary of the publication of Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, I will be at Revolution Books with Cornel West in a conversation about the publication of this book. So let's just close out today's show.